Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's just dive right into this because today we're going to fundamentally reframe a milestone that, let's be honest, so many men absolutely dread. Crossing that threshold of 50 is often shrouded in this quiet, unspoken apprehension. Men start to notice that the physical spontaneity they just took for granted in their 20s has shifted. But I want to set the record straight, right here, right now. This is not some inevitable slide into obsolescence. Hitting 50 is absolutely not a decline. It's a physiological frontier, and it just requires a totally new level of mastery. So today, we're going to look really closely at the architecture of male vitality, specifically those underlying mechanisms of arousal and performance, and figure out exactly how we can completely optimize them. There's this fantastic quote that acts as a massive pattern interrupt to pretty much everything society tells us about aging. It goes like this: the body is not failing, it is communicating. When the automatic, hydraulic systems of male potency start to require a bit more effort, your body isn't broken, it's communicating. It's actually sending you a really critical signal that the old ways of living, the high-stress routines, the highly processed diets, the complete lack of recovery, they just aren't sustainable anymore. Age-related erectile changes, they're actually profound, vital messages about your systemic, cardiovascular, and metabolic health. Think about your body in its youth, like a modern, straight-off-the-assembly line engine. You could just turn the key, burn fuel with reckless abandon, and completely ignore minor wear and tear. But at 50, you are now operating a high-performance vintage engine. The fuel lines might be just slightly narrower, and the timing, well, it needs a much more delicate touch. The real frustration happens when you try to operate a 50-year-old vintage classic using a 20-year-old's instruction manual. That obsolete approach just creates this terrible cycle of physical and psychological tension. But remember this: a meticulously maintained vintage engine can often outperform a modern one if you just know exactly how to tune it. All right, moving to section 1, the endothelium and nitric oxide. To really tune this vintage engine, we actually have to zoom way down to the microscopic level. I want you to meet the endothelium. This is a single, incredibly thin layer of cells lining literally every single blood vessel in your body. In a younger guy, this lining is perfectly smooth and flexible. You can think of it like a highly sophisticated chemical factory, and its primary job? Producing a crucial, super short-lived gas called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the absolute master key to male potency. It is the exact signaling molecule that tells the smooth muscles in your arteries to relax, which allows blood to flood in and create rigidity. Without it, the whole system just stalls out. But here's the harsh reality. By the time a man reaches 50, his natural production of nitric oxide has typically dropped by a whopping 50% compared to when he was 20. Half. Why? Well, it's the cumulative effect of oxidative stress, subtle systemic inflammation, and just the natural aging process. The endothelium just becomes less efficient, and those blood vessels simply don't open up as wide or as quickly as they used to. So how does this actually translate into the chemical cascade of an erection? It's kind of like a domino effect. It starts up in the brain, travels down the nerves, and those nerves release that precious nitric oxide. This triggers the production of a molecule called cGMP, which is basically the direct command for your smooth muscles to relax and trap blood. But here is where the biological tension really ramps up. As men age or if they face metabolic imbalances, these enzymes known as PDE5 swoop in and start breaking down that cGMP way too fast. The signal literally gets lost in the static before the body can even fully respond. Now, this brings us to a massive, life-saving revelation. Because the penile arteries are significantly narrower than your coronary arteries, they are the very first to show signs of blockage or reduced elasticity. The penis is quite literally the canary in the coal mine for your heart. If the microscopic capillaries in the pelvic region are struggling to dilate, that is your earliest warning sign that your larger heart and brain arteries are facing the exact same circulation issues. So fixing this, it isn't just about having fun in the bedroom, it's literally about saving your life. Let's move on to section 2, hormones and the mind. Okay, so now that we understand the vascular bottleneck, we need to look at the whole endocrine landscape. We hear all the time about testosterone just falling off a cliff, right? But the reality is actually a slow, steady erosion. We're talking about a 1% decline per year starting around age 30. And what matters most here isn't even the total number, it's your free testosterone. As this vital hormone drops, it physically alters your hardware. It reduces nerve density in the pelvic region, and it literally causes healthy, elastic, smooth muscle to be replaced by stiff collagen. So mechanically, it just makes it harder for the organ to expand. And guys, the plot thickens with an enzyme called aromatase. As men age, they tend to accumulate a bit more visceral fat, that deep belly fat. Well, this fat isn't just inactive weight just sitting there, it's an active endocrine organ, and it secretes aromatase. Aromatase actively steals your precious testosterone and converts it directly into estrogen. It's a vicious, brutal metabolic feedback loop. Lower testosterone leads to lower energy, which leads to more fat, which then converts even more of your testosterone into estrogen. This hormonal sabotage literally starves your tissues of the signals they need to work. But wait, we absolutely cannot forget the mind. The psychological sequence is such a powerful trap. Think about it. The very first time a man experiences a failure to perform, it plants a tiny seed of doubt. And that doubt, it quickly blooms into performance anxiety. The exact moment you feel anxious, your brain triggers a fight or flight response, flooding your entire body with adrenaline and cortisol. Now, cortisol is a potent vasoconstrictor. It physically shuts down blood vessels to prioritize your heart and lungs for survival. So the crazy thing is, the very anxiety about getting an erection releases the exact chemicals that make an erection physically impossible. Which leads us straight into a psychological trap perfectly termed spectatoring. This is when a man is essentially standing outside of himself, watching and judging his own performance in real time. It completely disconnects him from the sensory and emotional intimacy that is actually required for natural arousal. It just locks the brain right back into that high-stress, highly constricted state. You absolutely have to break this open loop of frustration by shifting from a rigid, goal-oriented mindset back to a sensory, process-oriented one. Which brings us to Section 3, Lifestyle Re-engagement Protocols. Basically, how we fix it. We've covered the why of the problem. Now, how do we actually rebuild this internal ecosystem? You need a multi-pronged assault to reverse that arterial stiffness. And it starts on your plate with nutrition, specifically saturating your body with dietary nitrates. We're talking big servings of arugula, spinach, and beets. When you consume these, your body uses this amazing specialized pathway in the mouth and stomach to convert them directly into nitric oxide. This essentially creates a massive nitric oxide dump that completely bypasses your damaged endothelium and starts reopening those constricted circulatory pathways almost immediately. You've also got to fundamentally, completely rethink how you view rest. You really need to start treating REM sleep like a performance-enhancing drug. During deep sleep, your body conducts its absolute most vital maintenance. It pulses testosterone through your bloodstream and it triggers nocturnal erections. And those morning erections, they're just random. They're your body's literal way of exercising the tissues, oxygenating them, and actively preventing that stiff fibrosis we talked about earlier. Listen, if you're consistently sleeping less than 6 hours a night, you are operating with the hormonal profile of a man a full decade older. Then, of course, there's the physical stimulus. High-intensity intervals and heavy resistance training, like your squats and your deadlifts, these are metabolic tools. They naturally boost growth hormone and testosterone while physically forcing your blood vessels to dilate and contract, basically scrubbing that endothelium clean. Equally critical, though, is pelvic floor strengthening, or Kegels. The ischiocavernosus and bulbocavernosus muscles are responsible for literally clamping down and trapping blood in the penis. If they are weak, the blood just escapes, a frustrating condition known as venous leak. Strengthening those muscles builds the dam that maintains the pressure. Let's wrap this up with Section 4, the ultimate health barometer. So, tying all of these threads together, potency is health. This is the grand revelation of this entire explainer. A superior erection is not just some separate recreational luxury. It is the ultimate dashboard light. It's the core metric of your biological age, indicating perfect cardiac efficiency, precise neural transmission, and totally optimized metabolic health. You simply cannot fix the performance in the bedroom without inherently fortifying the longevity and health of your heart and your brain. But how do you actually achieve this? 2 words: compound effect. Consistency over intensity. Too many guys try to reverse literally decades of neglect with a sudden panic-driven week of extreme dieting or crazy exhaustive workouts. And you know what that does? It just spikes your cortisol. The true path to vitality relies on the relentless, steady application of these daily habits. It's the daily hydration, the continuous choice of whole foods over processed sugars that glycate and stiffen your arteries, and doing those daily pelvic floor exercises. Age brings the wisdom to apply strategy, where youth relied entirely on just raw, dumb energy. So I want to leave you with a challenge today. Are you feeding the fire or are you dousing the flames? What is the single biggest leak in your physiological bucket right now? Is it your sleep, your stress, your diet? It is time to stop accepting age-related decline as some kind of final sentence. Your body is incredibly plastic, and it is ready to respond if you give it the right inputs. Stop being a passive observer of your own aging and become the active architect of your resurgence. The tools are literally right in your hands, the science is crystal clear, and the potential is right there in your blood. Go plug that leak today.